The testing facility hummed with the constant drone of machinery, but Dr. Sarah barely noticed anymore. She had been working in the xenobiology department for 3 years, and the sounds of the research station had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. What never became familiar, however, was the sight that greeted her every morning in Laboratory 7. The creature in the reinforced containment unit was unlike anything in the known galaxy. Standing nearly 8 feet tall on its hind legs, it possessed a muscular frame covered in midnight black scales that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. 4 arms extended from its torso, each ending in clawed hands that could tear through steel plating. Its elongated skull housed 6 eyes arranged in pairs, glowing amber in the dim laboratory light. Most disturbing of all was its intelligence. The creature, designated Subject 47 by the research team, watched everything with an awareness that made Sarah's skin crawl. The Galactic Research Consortium had captured Subject 47 from a derelict ship drifting near the Vega system 6 months ago. The ship itself was a mystery, constructed from materials that analysis and powered by technology that operated on principles beyond current understanding. When the salvage team boarded the vessel, they found it empty except for this single occupant, sealed in what appeared to be a stasis chamber. Sarah approached the containment unit, her daily routine beginning with a careful visual inspection. The creature turned its multiple eyes toward her, tracking her movement with predatory precision. Most of the research staff avoided prolonged eye contact with Subject 47, claiming it made them uncomfortable. Sarah understood their unease, but she had learned to see past the creature's frightening appearance. "Good morning," she said softly, her voice carrying through the intercom system into the sealed chamber. The creature tilted its head slightly, a gesture she had come to recognize as acknowledgement. Dr. Reeves, the department head, insisted that any vocalization from the research staff was pointless since the creature showed no signs of understanding human language. Sarah disagreed, though she kept her opinions to herself. The morning routine continued with Sarah checking the environmental controls. The creatures remained unknown, so the research team had established atmospheric conditions based on the ship's original settings. The chamber maintained a slightly higher gravity than Earth normal, with an atmosphere rich in nitrogen and trace amounts of gases that would be toxic to humans. Temperature readings showed a steady 22 degrees Celsius, which seemed to keep Subject 47 comfortable. Sarah's tablet chimed with new orders from Dr. Reeves. Today's schedule included another round of cognitive testing, followed by physical examinations that would require sedation. She frowned as she read the details. The creature had been subjected to dozens of similar tests over the past months, each one more invasive than the last. The results consistently showed high intelligence, problem solving capabilities that exceeded most known species, and a physical resilience that bordered on supernatural. What bothered Sarah most was the creature's behavior during these tests. Subject 47 never fought back, never attempted to harm the researchers, despite being more than capable of doing so. The containment unit's force fields were powerful, but Sarah had observed the creature testing their limits with careful, methodical pressure. If it wanted to break free, she suspected it could. Instead, the creature endured each procedure with what could only be described as resigned cooperation. It would extend an arm for blood samples, remain still during brain scans, and follow simple commands with mechanical precision. The behavior suggested either complete defeat or something far more calculating. Sarah began preparing for the day's first test when she noticed something unusual. Subject 47 was standing in the center of its chamber, all 6 eyes fixed on her with an intensity she had never seen before. The creature's posture was different too, more alert, more focused. She paused in her preparations and moved closer to the containment unit. "What is it?" she asked, though she didn't expect an answer. The creature continued staring at her, then slowly raised one of its arms and pressed a clawed hand against the transparent aluminum barrier. The gesture was unmistakably deliberate, almost human in its intent. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. In all the months of observation, Subject 47 had never initiated contact like this. She found herself moving closer to the barrier, drawn by curiosity and something else she couldn't quite name. When she was close enough to see her reflection in the creature's amber eyes, it did something that changed everything. Subject 47 spoke. The voice was deep and resonant, modulated in ways that human vocal cords could never achieve, but the words were unmistakably in Standard Galactic, the common language used throughout the consortium territories. "You are different from the others," it said, each word carefully pronounced despite the alien vocal apparatus. You speak to me as if I am more than a specimen. Sarah stumbled backward, her tablet clattering to the floor. The sound echoed through the laboratory, but her attention remained fixed on the creature. It could speak. It understood everything that had been happening. The implications crashed through her mind like a tidal wave. You can talk, she whispered, her voice barely audible even to herself. I have always been able to communicate, Subject 47 replied, lowering its hand from the barrier. I chose not to reveal this capability to your colleagues. They see only a beast to be studied and dissected. You see something more. Why are you telling me this? Sarah asked, her scientific training warring with her growing sense of moral outrage. If the creature was sentient, truly sentient, then everything they had been doing constituted torture. Because I need your help, the creature said simply. My name is, and I am the last of my kind. The ship your people found was not merely a vessel but a tomb, a monument to a civilization that destroyed itself in pursuit of knowledge and power. I was placed in stasis not as punishment but as penance to bear witness to what we had become. Sarah's mind reeled as she tried to process this revelation. How long were you in stasis? By your measurements, approximately 3,000 years, replied. I have watched the rise and fall of dozens of species through the ship's sensors. I have seen the patterns that lead to destruction, and I have seen the rare few who choose a different path. What does this have to do with me? Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Your species stands at a crossroads, said, moving closer to the barrier again. The Galactic Research Consortium speaks of progress and discovery, but I have observed their true nature. They seek to weaponize everything they study. They will attempt to replicate my people's technology, not understanding that it carries within it the seeds of annihilation. Sarah glanced toward the laboratory door, suddenly aware that their conversation could be monitored. The recording systems were supposedly inactive during routine maintenance periods, but she couldn't be certain. Why should I trust you? She asked. Because you have already shown me kindness when you had nothing to gain, replied. Because you speak to me as an equal rather than a thing to be examined. Because in 3,000 years of observation, you are the first being I have encountered who might be capable of making the right choice when faced with power beyond imagination. Before Sarah could respond, the laboratory door hissed open. Dr. Reeves entered with two security guards and a medical team, their faces set with professional determination. Sarah quickly bent to retrieve her fallen tablet, trying to appear as if nothing unusual had occurred. Doctor, Reeves said briskly, we're moving ahead with today's procedures. The consortium directors are eager for results, and we can't afford any more delays. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice to remain steady. She glanced at, who had returned to its previous position in the center of the chamber. To all outward appearances, it was once again nothing more than an alien specimen awaiting examination. Prepare the neural interface, Reeves continued, consulting his own tablet. We're going to attempt direct contact with its brain tissue. If we can map its cognitive patterns, we might be able to reverse engineer its thought processes. The procedure Dr. Reeves described would be invasive, potentially damaging, and certainly agonizing for a sentient being. Sarah felt her stomach twist as she realized the full scope of what was about to happen. Remained motionless, but she could see the subtle tension in its posture. Sir, Sarah began carefully, perhaps we should consider less invasive methods first. The creature has shown no signs of aggression. Maybe we could try basic communication protocols. Reeves looked at her with barely concealed irritation. Doctor, we've been over this before. The subject shows no indication of higher cognitive function beyond basic animal intelligence. We're not here to make friends with our test subjects. Sarah wanted to scream, to tell him that he was wrong, that the creature was not only intelligent but possibly more advanced than any of them. Instead, she nodded and began preparing the neural interface equipment. The device looked like a metallic spider, its probe-tipped legs designed to penetrate skull bone and make direct contact with brain tissue. As the medical team moved the equipment into position, finally spoke again, but only Sarah was close enough to hear the whispered words through the intercom. Remember what I have told you, it said, so quietly that the words were almost lost in the ambient noise. What happens here today will determine the fate of more than just one prisoner. The neural interface activated with a high-pitched whine, and its body went rigid as the probes penetrated its skull. No sound escaped the creature, but Sarah could see the agony in its eyes. The monitors around the laboratory erupted with data streams as the interface began mapping the alien brain's neural pathways. What appeared on the screens made Dr. Reeves gasp in amazement. The cognitive patterns were not only complex, beyond anything they had previously encountered, but seemed to operate on multiple levels simultaneously. It was as if his brain was processing dozens of different thought streams at once, creating a symphony of consciousness that dwarfed human intelligence. Magnificent, Reeves breathed, his eyes fixed on the displays. This level of cognitive function should be impossible. If we can understand how its brain operates, we could revolutionize artificial intelligence, enhance human mental capacity, create soldiers with superhuman thinking speed. Sarah watched in horror as her colleague's excitement grew. She could see the hunger in his eyes, the same expression she had observed in scientists throughout history when they stood on the verge of a discovery that could change everything. The fact that their breakthrough was built on the suffering of a sentient being seemed irrelevant to him. The neural interface continued its work, drilling deeper into his consciousness. The creature's body began to tremble, though whether from pain or something else, Sarah couldn't tell. The data streams flowing across the monitors became increasingly erratic, showing patterns that conventional understanding of neural activity. Then something extraordinary happened. The screens began displaying information that had nothing to do with brain patterns. Instead, they showed star charts, mathematical equations, and technical schematics that looked like blueprints for technology far beyond consortium capabilities. Dr. Reeves leaned forward, his excitement reaching fever pitch. It's not just thinking, he whispered. It's transmitting data directly through the interface. This creature is a living repository of advanced knowledge. Sarah realized with growing dread that was deliberately sharing this information. The creature was feeding the research team exactly what they wanted to see, giving them access to the kind of technological advancement that would inevitably lead to the destruction it had warned her about. The schematics flowing across the screens showed weapon designs that could crack planets, energy manipulation techniques that could destabilize stars, and artificial intelligence protocols that could subjugate entire civilizations. It was everything the consortium's military divisions had ever dreamed of, packaged in a form they could understand and potentially replicate. Dr. Reeves was already making calls, summoning additional specialists and alerting the consortium directors. Word would spread quickly through the facility, then beyond to the highest levels of galactic government. Within hours, Subject 47 would become the most valuable asset in known space. Sarah looked at and saw something in its eyes that chilled her to the bone. The creature was watching Dr. Reeves with an expression that could only be described as satisfied. It was giving them exactly what they thought they wanted, knowing full well where that path would lead. The test continued for another 2 hours, during which time the neural interface extracted enough information to keep the consortium's scientists busy for years. When the procedure finally ended, collapsed to the floor of its chamber, its massive frame trembling with exhaustion. The probes retracted with small clicks, leaving tiny wounds that began to heal almost immediately. Incredible regenerative capabilities, too, one of the medical technicians noted, making entries on his tablet. This specimen could provide insights into multiple fields of study. As the team packed up their equipment, chattering excitedly about the day's discoveries, Sarah remained beside the containment unit. Lay motionless, but she could see its eyes tracking her movement. When the others finally left, it slowly pulled itself to a sitting position. "Why did you give them that information?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because they would have taken it eventually," replied, its voice weak but determined. "This way, I control what they receive and when they receive it. The knowledge I shared today will seem revolutionary to them, but it is only the beginning. The real secrets, the truly dangerous ones, remain hidden." "But they'll want more," Sarah protested. "They'll keep coming back, keep subjecting you to these procedures." "Yes," agreed. "And each time they will become more desperate, more willing to cross ethical boundaries in pursuit of power. Eventually, they will reveal their true nature completely." Sarah began to understand the creature's strategy. It wasn't simply enduring captivity, it was conducting an experiment of its own, was testing humanity, giving them small tastes of power to see how they would react. So far, the results were exactly what it had expected. "What happens when they fail your test?" Sarah asked. "The same thing that happened to my people, and dozens of others before them, said sadly. They will destroy themselves with knowledge they are not wise enough to handle. The weapons they build from my memories will turn against their creators. The artificial intelligences they construct will decide that organic life is an inefficiency to be eliminated. The power they seek will consume them utterly. And you'll just watch it happen. I have no choice, replied. I am bound by laws older than your civilization, compelled to bear witness to the rise and fall of species. I cannot intervene directly, cannot prevent the choices others make. I can only observe and remember. Sarah felt a crushing weight settle on her shoulders. She was watching the beginning of the end for her own species, and there seemed to be nothing she could do to stop it. The knowledge had shared would spread through the consortium like a virus, corrupting everything it touched. There is one possibility, said, as if reading her thoughts. In all my years of observation, I have learned that every species produces individuals who are different, who can see beyond the hunger for power to understand the true costs of knowledge. You may be such a person. What could I possibly do? Sarah asked. I'm just a researcher. I have no influence, no power to change anything. Power is not always about authority or control, said. Sometimes the most important actions are the smallest ones, taken by those who simply choose to do what is right rather than what is convenient. Before Sarah could ask what it meant, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Emergency lights bathed the laboratory in pulsing red illumination as automated voices announced a security breach in the lower levels. Sarah's tablet immediately received an emergency message ordering all personnel to their assigned safety stations. Through the chaos, she heard Dr. Reeves shouting orders in the corridor outside. Something about data theft and unauthorized access to the research servers. The implications hit her like a physical blow. Someone had infiltrated the facility specifically to steal the information had provided. It begins, said quietly, watching the flashing lights with ancient eyes. The knowledge spreads, and with it, the seeds of destruction. How long do you think it will take before the first weapons appear? Before the first artificial intelligence achieves consciousness and decides that its creators are a threat to be eliminated? Sarah didn't answer because she couldn't. The future described seemed both inevitable and terrifying. She had dedicated her life to the pursuit of scientific knowledge, believing that understanding the universe would ultimately benefit all sentient life. Now she was confronted with the possibility that some knowledge was too dangerous to possess. The security alerts continued for another hour before gradually subsiding. When normal lighting returned to the laboratory, Sarah found herself alone with once again. The creature had moved to the front of its containment unit, its 6 eyes fixed on her with unwavering intensity. The choice is before you now, it said. You can report our conversation to your superiors, continue participating in their experiments, and watch as your species follows the path of countless others before them. Or you can choose to help me, knowing that doing so will make you an enemy of everything you have ever known. Sarah stared at the alien being that had just offered to turn her life upside down. Every logical part of her mind insisted that she should report the creature's ability to communicate, follow proper protocols, and trust that the consortium's leadership would make the right decisions. But another part of her, a part that had been growing stronger since their first conversation, recognized the truth in its words. She had seen the hunger in Dr. Reeves' eyes when the alien technology appeared on the screens. She had witnessed the immediate focus on military applications rather than peaceful uses. She understood that the knowledge possessed would indeed be weaponized, and that the weapons would eventually be turned against their creators. What would you need me to do? She asked quietly. Help me escape, replied without hesitation. The containment systems are sophisticated but not impenetrable. With your access codes and knowledge of the facility layout, I could reach the shuttle bay and return to space. They'll hunt you down, Sarah protested. The consortium has ships throughout this sector. You'd never make it to safe space. Perhaps not, admitted. But I must try. My ship contained more than just technology. It held the complete historical records of my people, including detailed accounts of every species we encountered and studied. If the consortium gains access to that information, they will learn how to eliminate entire civilizations without leaving a trace. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. Your ship is still out there. Hidden in the asteroid field where your people found me, confirmed. I activated its concealment systems before allowing myself to be captured. The vessel will remain hidden until I return to claim it or until my death triggers its self-destruct sequence. The weight of the decision pressed down on Sarah like a physical force. Helping escape would end her career, probably land her in prison, and make her a fugitive from the most powerful organization in the galaxy. Refusing to help would make her complicit in what could become the extinction of her own species. She thought about her parents, who had supported her through years of education and training. She thought about her colleagues, most of whom were good people trying to advance the cause of scientific knowledge. She thought about the billions of beings throughout consortium space who had no idea that their future was being decided in a laboratory by a captured alien and a conflicted researcher. If I help you, Sarah said finally, what happens to everyone else? What about the people who are just trying to live their lives and build something better? That depends on choices yet to be made, replied. My people face the same crossroads your species now approaches. We chose poorly, and our civilization paid the ultimate price. But choice itself is what makes a species worth preserving. If your people can learn wisdom before it is too late, they might survive what is coming. And if they can't, then they will join the countless others who chose power over wisdom, said sadly. The universe will mourn their passing, and then continue its endless dance of creation and destruction. Sarah looked around the laboratory that had been her second home for 3 years. Everything seemed different now, tainted by the knowledge of what was really happening within these walls. The equipment she had operated with pride now felt like instruments of torture. The research she had conducted with scientific enthusiasm now seemed like violations of basic dignity. How do I know you're telling the truth? She asked, making one last attempt to find an alternative to the impossible choice before her. You don't, admitted. You must decide based on what you have observed and what your conscience tells you is right. I cannot prove my words any more than your colleagues can prove their good intentions. In the end, we all act on faith in something greater than our immediate self-interest. The laboratory door chimed, indicating someone was requesting entry. Sarah checked her tablet and saw Dr. Reeves' identification. She looked at one more time, seeing not a monster or a specimen, but a being carrying the weight of cosmic tragedy on its shoulders. I'll find a way, she whispered, then activated the door controls. Dr. Reeves entered with barely contained excitement, radiating from every pore. Behind him came a woman Sarah didn't recognize, wearing the black uniform of Consortium Intelligence. The sight of the intelligence operative sent a chill through Sarah's body. Dr. Reeves began, I'd like you to meet Director from Strategic Research Division. She'll be overseeing our enhanced interrogation of Subject 47. Director stepped forward, her cold eyes taking in every detail of the laboratory. Doctor, I've reviewed your work with this specimen. Your attention to detail and thorough documentation will be valuable in the coming weeks. Enhanced interrogation? Sarah asked, though she was afraid she already knew what the term meant. The neural interface was just the beginning, explained. We've developed more sophisticated extraction methods that will allow us to access deeper levels of the creature's memory. We estimate we can map its entire knowledge base within a month. Sarah glanced at, who remained motionless in the center of its chamber. The creature showed no reaction to the announcement, but she could sense the subtle tension in its posture. The procedures will be extensive, continued, requiring round-the-clock monitoring and multiple extraction sessions per day. Dr. Reeves has recommended you as the primary observer, given your familiarity with the subject's behavioral patterns. The irony was bitter beyond words. They were asking her to participate in the complete mental dissection of a being she now knew to be not only sentient, but probably more intelligent than all of them combined. They wanted her to watch as they tortured every thought and memory from his mind. I'm honored by the recommendation, Sarah managed to say, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her chest. Excellent, said with satisfaction. We begin tomorrow morning. I suggest you get some rest, Doctor. The coming weeks will be demanding for all of us. After the two left, Sarah found herself alone with once again. The creature moved slowly to the front of its containment unit, its multiple eyes reflecting the laboratory lights like stars in a dark sky. Tomorrow, it said simply. Tomorrow, Sarah agreed, and in that single word she made her choice. The next morning arrived with the mechanical precision of the facility's automated systems, but Sarah felt as if she hadn't slept at all. She had spent the night planning, calculating security rotations, and memorizing facility layouts she had never paid attention to before. Every scenario she considered seemed to end with either death or her own imprisonment, but she had committed herself to action regardless of the consequences. Sarah arrived at laboratory 7:30 minutes before her scheduled shift, using her access codes to enter the restricted area. The facility operated on skeleton crew during the early morning hours, with most personnel not arriving until the standard work period began. This gave her the window she needed to implement the first phase of her plan. Stood in its chamber as she entered, but something was different. The creature's posture suggested heightened alertness, and all six eyes tracked her movement with intense focus. When she approached the containment unit, it moved closer to the transparent barrier. "You have decided," said quietly, the words barely audible through the intercom system. "Yes," Sarah replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "But we need to move carefully. Director has increased security throughout this section. There are guards posted at every checkpoint." "I am aware," said, tilting its head slightly. "I can sense the electromagnetic signatures of their equipment, hear their communications through the walls. Your species relies heavily on technology, which makes you predictable." Sarah began her daily routine, checking environmental controls and system status reports while speaking in low tones. To any observer, she would appear to be conducting normal maintenance procedures. The enhanced interrogation begins in 3 hours. Once they start the deep extraction process, you won't be able to hide your intelligence anymore. The procedures will also weaken the containment field generators, observed. The neural interfaces require significant power draws that will create fluctuations in the barrier systems. Director does not realize this because she sees only the potential rewards, not the associated risks. Sarah paused in her work, understanding the implications. "You're planning to break free during the extraction." "I am planning to give you the opportunity to help me break free," corrected. "The choice must still be yours. I will not escape through violence that you did not actively facilitate." The strange ethics of the situation struck Sarah with unexpected force. Even in planning its escape, the alien creature was careful to preserve her moral agency. It would not compromise her conscience by taking actions she couldn't accept, even if those actions might ensure its freedom. "What do you need me to do?" Sarah asked. "When the containment fields fluctuate, you will have approximately 30 seconds to override the emergency lockdown protocols," explained. "The control systems are accessed through your workstation. I will transmit the specific commands you need to enter." "Transmit?" Sarah looked puzzled. "How can you transmit anything? You're isolated in that chamber." "The neural interface creates a two-way connection," said with what might have been amusement. "While your colleagues believe they are extracting information from me, I am also learning about their systems. I have already mapped most of the facility's electronic infrastructure." Sarah felt a mixture of admiration and apprehension. Was not only enduring the invasive procedures, but actively using them to gather intelligence for its escape. The creature's ability to operate on multiple levels simultaneously was becoming more apparent with every conversation. "There's something else you need to know," Sarah said, checking her tablet to ensure they had more time before the next shift arrived. "After you escape, what happens to me? Director will know someone helped you. She'll investigate everyone with access to this laboratory." "You will come with me," said without hesitation. "What?" Sarah stared at the creature in shock. "I can't just disappear. I have a life here, responsibilities." "You have a choice," replied calmly. "You can remain and face interrogation that will likely lead to your imprisonment or execution, or you can come with me and help prevent the catastrophe your species is rushing toward." The brutal simplicity of the options left Sarah momentarily speechless. She had somehow assumed that helping escape would be the end of her involvement, that she could return to her normal life and hope for the best. The reality was far more complex. "Where would we go?" she asked. "The consortium controls most of inhabited space. There's nowhere to hide." "There are places beyond consortium reach," said. "Independent systems, neutral zones, worlds where my people established monitoring stations. I can offer you protection, but I cannot offer you the life you have known." Before Sarah could respond, her tablet chimed with an incoming message from Dr. Reeves. The morning briefing was being moved up by 2 hours to accommodate director's schedule. The enhanced interrogation would begin immediately after the briefing ended. They're starting early, Sarah said, her pulse quickening. We have less time than we thought. Then we must be ready, replied. Remember, when the moment comes, you will have 30 seconds to act. Do not hesitate, do not second guess yourself. Trust your instincts and move. Sarah nodded, though her hands were already trembling slightly. She had never done anything more rebellious than submitting research reports late. Now, she was preparing to commit what the consortium would consider treason of the highest order. The next hour passed with agonizing slowness as Sarah went through the motions of preparing for the day's procedures. Dr. Reeves arrived with his usual enthusiasm, followed by director and a team of specialists Sarah didn't recognize. The newcomers wore medical gear but carried themselves like soldiers, suggesting they were trained in more than just scientific procedures. Doctor, director said briskly, today we'll be using advanced extraction protocols. Your job is to monitor the subject's vital signs and behavioral responses. If you observe anything unusual, report it immediately. Understood, Sarah replied, settling at her workstation and trying to appear calm. The screens around her displayed various readings from containment unit, all showing normal parameters. The enhanced neural interface was far more sophisticated than the previous day's equipment. Instead of simple probes, the new system employed a full cranial array that would surround head with dozens of connection points. The device looked like a metallic crown of thorns, its purpose clearly more extraction than analysis. Beginning sedation protocols, one of the medical specialists announced, preparing a series of injections designed to keep the subject conscious but compliant during the procedure. Sarah watched in horror as the sedatives were introduced into his chamber through automated delivery systems. The creature made no attempt to avoid the medications, simply standing still as the chemicals entered its bloodstream. Within minutes, its massive frame began to sway slightly. Subject is responsive to sedation, the specialist reported, proceeding with interface installation. The cranial array descended from the chamber's ceiling on mechanical arms, positioning itself around its head with mechanical precision. The creature's eyes remained alert despite the sedation, tracking the movement of the equipment with obvious understanding of what was about to happen. Installation complete, the specialist announced, beginning neural extraction in 3, 2, 1. The array activated with a sound like breaking glass, amplified 1,000 times. Every screen in the laboratory erupted with data streams as the system began its invasive mapping of consciousness. The creature's body went rigid, its clawed hands clenching into fists as the extraction process began. Sarah forced herself to watch the readings on her monitor, noting changes in heart rate, neural activity, and stress hormones. The numbers painted a picture of intense agony, but made no sound. It simply endured, maintaining its dignified silence even as its mind was violated in the most fundamental way possible. Remarkable cognitive architecture, Dr. Reeves breathed, his attention fixed on the neural mapping displays. Look at these synaptic pathways. The creature's brain operates like a biological quantum computer. Director leaned over his shoulder, her eyes bright with avarice. Can we replicate the structure? Build artificial systems based on these patterns? With enough time and resources, possibly, Reeves replied. We're seeing processing capabilities that exceed our most advanced AIs by several orders of magnitude. If we could reverse engineer even a portion of this cognitive architecture. Sarah felt sick listening to them discuss, as if it were a machine to be disassembled, and the creature was suffering unbearable pain, so they could steal the very structure of its thoughts, and they spoke of it as a magnificent opportunity for advancement. 20 minutes into the procedure, the first power fluctuation occurred. The containment field flickered momentarily as the neural extraction system drew more energy than the generators could efficiently supply. Sarah's fingers moved to her keyboard. Positioning over the commands had somehow transmitted to her workstation. Minor power fluctuation, she reported, keeping her voice level. Backup systems are compensating. Continue the extraction, director ordered. We can't afford to lose momentum now. The procedure continued, with power demands increasing as the system delved deeper into neural pathways. Sarah watched the energy readings climb toward critical levels, knowing that each spike brought them closer to the moment when the containment barriers would become vulnerable. Then she saw something on the screens that made her blood run cold. The neural extraction wasn't just mapping thoughts. It was discovering information the creature had deliberately hidden. Technical specifications for weapons that could destroy solar systems began flowing across the displays, followed by instructions for creating artificial life forms designed to exterminate organic species. My God, Dr. Reeves whispered, his excitement overcoming professional restraint. This creature isn't just intelligent, it's a repository of advanced warfare technology. Director, we need to contact the military divisions immediately. Already in progress, replied, speaking rapidly into her communicator. Secure channels to strategic command, priority alpha authorization. We've found the Holy Grail. Sarah realized with dawning horror that had been right about the consortium's true nature. Faced with technology beyond their understanding, the leadership's first instinct was they weren't thinking about peaceful applications or scientific advancement, they wanted instruments of war. The power fluctuations became more frequent as the extraction system struggled to process the vast amounts of information flooding through the neural interface. Warning lights began flashing throughout the laboratory as the facility's power grid approached overload conditions. Should we reduce the extraction rate? One of the specialists asked nervously. Absolutely not, Director replied without hesitation. Increase power to maximum levels. We need everything this creature knows. The decision was exactly what had predicted. Sarah could see it in the creature's eyes, a grim satisfaction that its captors were revealing their true nature so completely. They were so blinded by greed that they couldn't see they were walking into a trap. The final power surge came 37 minutes into the procedure. Every containment field in the laboratory flickered simultaneously as the facility's generators struggled to meet the neural extraction system's impossible demands. Sarah's hands moved across her keyboard without conscious thought, entering the commands that would override the emergency lockdown protocols. For a moment that lasted forever, the barriers around's chamber disappeared completely. The creature moved with liquid grace despite the sedatives in its system, rising from the laboratory floor like a shadow given form. The cranial array shattered as straightened to its full height, pieces of metal and circuitry falling around it like broken crown jewels. Containment breach, someone shouted, but it was already too late. Four arms moved in a complex pattern, and suddenly every electronic system in the laboratory went dead. Emergency lighting activated, bathing everything in dim red illumination, but the main power grid had been completely shut down. The creature had somehow used its connection to the facility's network to trigger a catastrophic system failure. How is that possible? Dr. Reeves stared at his dead workstation in disbelief. The neural interface was read-only. It shouldn't have been able to transmit anything back to our systems. You assumed it was read-only, said, its voice carrying clearly through the suddenly quiet laboratory. You saw what you expected to see rather than what was actually happening. Director reached for her sidearm, but moved faster than human eyes could follow. One moment the intelligence operative was drawing her weapon. The next, she was suspended in the air by one of the creature's massive hands, her feet dangling helplessly above the floor. I could end your life with minimal effort, said conversationally, holding at eye level. Your bones would snap like twigs, your organs would cease functioning, your consciousness would simply stop, but I will not choose violence when other options remain available. The creature set Director down with surprising gentleness, then turned its attention to the others in the room. Dr. Reeves and his team pressed themselves against the far wall, their faces pale with terror in the emergency lighting. Doctor said, extending one hand toward Sarah, it is time to go. Sarah looked around the laboratory one final time, seeing her former colleagues' frightened faces in the red glow of the emergency lights. These were people she had worked beside for years, shared meals with, celebrated successes, and mourned failures alongside. Now she was abandoning them to face the consequences of decisions they hadn't made. You don't have to do this, Sarah, Dr. Reeves said quietly. Whatever it's promised you, whatever it's told you, you don't have to throw your life away. Sarah felt the weight of the choice pressing down on her shoulders. Everything familiar and safe lay behind her, everything unknown and dangerous lay ahead. But she had seen too much to pretend she could go back to the way things were. I'm sorry, she said to Dr. Reeves, then took outstretched hand. The creature's skin was surprisingly warm despite its scaled appearance. Sarah felt strength in that grip that could have crushed her bones to powder, but the touch was gentle, almost protective. Together, they moved toward the laboratory's exit. The security systems are still offline, explained as they entered the corridor. I have created a window of approximately 15 minutes before backup generators restore primary functions. We must reach the shuttle bay before then. The facility's corridors were dimly lit by emergency power, creating a maze of shadows and red-tinged pathways. Sarah had walked these halls countless times, but everything looked different in the strange lighting. Familiar landmarks seemed alien and threatening. They encountered the first security team at the intersection of corridors 7 and 12. 6 guards in full combat gear rounded the corner ahead of them, weapons raised and ready. The team leader shouted something about stopping and surrendering, but was already moving. Sarah watched in amazement as the creature flowed between the guards like water, finding the path of least resistance. It never struck anyone, never caused visible harm, but somehow all 6 guards ended up unconscious on the floor within seconds. Their weapons lay scattered and useless around them. How did you do that? Sarah asked as they continued toward the shuttle bay. Pressure points, replied simply. Every species with a centralized nervous system has them. I studied your anatomy extensively during my captivity. They reached the shuttle bay without encountering further resistance, though Sarah could hear alarms beginning to sound throughout the facility as backup power systems came online. The bay contained 3 shuttles designed for short-range transportation, any of which would be capable of reaching the asteroid field where ship waited. Which one? Sarah asked, but was already moving toward the smallest craft, a 2-person reconnaissance shuttle with advanced sensor arrays and minimal defensive capabilities. The creature's hands moved over the shuttle's control systems with impossible speed, interfacing with the electronic systems in ways that should have been impossible for someone unfamiliar with human technology. Within minutes, the craft was powered up and ready for departure. How do you know how to fly our ships? Sarah asked as she strapped herself into the co-pilot seat. I have been observing your technology for months, replied, settling into the pilot's position despite its massive frame. Your engineering principles are relatively straightforward once the underlying logic is understood. The shuttle bay's massive doors began to open, revealing the star-filled darkness of space beyond. Sarah felt a moment of vertigo as she realized she was leaving everything she had ever known behind. Her apartment, her research, her career, her entire life was disappearing behind them as the shuttle accelerated away from the research facility. Where exactly are we going? Sarah asked once they had cleared the facility's immediate vicinity. To recover my ship, replied, adjusting their course toward the asteroid field, then to a place where we can plan our next actions without interference. Next actions. The information I shared with your colleagues will spread throughout the consortium within days, explained, its multiple eyes scanning the sensor displays. Scientists and military leaders will begin attempting to replicate the technologies they observed. Most will fail, but some will succeed well enough to create weapons of unimaginable destructive potential. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Can we stop them? Not directly, admitted. But we can ensure that when the inevitable catastrophe occurs, some remnant of your species survives to learn from the experience. The asteroid field appeared on their sensors as a collection of tumbling rocks and metallic debris, seemingly empty of anything unusual. But as they approached the coordinates provided, space itself seemed to shimmer and distort. Suddenly, a ship materialized before them, its exotic hull gleaming with an inner light that spoke of technologies beyond human understanding. Cloaking field disengaged, said with satisfaction. Welcome aboard the Doctor. May it serve as the beginning of a new chapter in both our people's histories. The ship that appeared before them was beautiful in the way that mathematical equations could be beautiful, its curves and angles following principles that human engineering had never discovered. It was clearly designed by minds that thought in ways fundamentally different from human consciousness. Yet there was something harmonious about its proportions that appealed to universal aesthetic principles. As their shuttle approached the larger vessel's docking bay, Sarah realized that her old life was truly over. She was no longer Dr. Sarah, respected and researcher. She was now something entirely new, a human involuntary exile, committed to preventing her own species from destroying itself with knowledge it wasn't ready to possess. Are you ready for what comes next? Asked as the docking sequence initiated. Sarah thought about Director's hungry eyes. about Dr. Reeves' excitement over possibilities, about the countless ways the technology she had helped steal could be misused. Then she thought about the billions of people throughout consortium space who had no idea their future was being decided by ambitious leaders and alien artifacts. Yes, she said and meant it, I'm ready. The shuttle bay doors of the opened before them like the entrance to a new world, and Sarah stepped across the threshold into the unknown future that awaited both species. Behind them, the research facility grew smaller and smaller until it vanished among the stars, taking with it the last remnants of her former life. But ahead lay possibilities she couldn't yet imagine, guided by an ancient being who had spent watching civilizations rise and fall. For the first time since the whole ordeal began, Sarah felt something approaching hope. Perhaps humanity's story didn't have to end the same way as all the others. Perhaps there was still time to choose wisdom over power. Time would tell whether her faith was justified or whether she had simply delayed the inevitable by a few years. But at least she would face that future knowing she had chosen to act according to her conscience rather than her convenience. In a universe where such choices were becoming increasingly rare, that meant everything. 3 months had passed since Sarah's world changed forever, and she still sometimes woke expecting to find herself in her small apartment near the research facility. Instead, she found herself aboard surrounded by technology that operated according to principles she was only beginning to understand. The ship had become her new home, her classroom, and her sanctuary all at once. Had been true to his word about her safety, but the protection came with a perspective that challenged everything she thought she knew about galactic civilization. The alien being had shown her monitoring stations throughout the galaxy, hidden observation posts that had recorded the rise and fall of dozens of species over the each recorded civilization had faced the same test that humanity now confronted, and each had made the same fatal choice. The pattern never varies, explained as they reviewed historical records from his people's archives. A species develops space travel, encounters advanced technology, and immediately seeks to weaponize everything they discover. They become so focused on gaining power over their neighbors that they forget to question whether they possess the wisdom to handle such power responsibly. Sarah studied the holographic displays showing the final days of the Empire, a civilization that had achieved faster than light travel just 300 years ago. Their first contact with advanced technology had led to the development of antimatter weapons capable of sterilizing entire star systems. Within 50 years, they had used those weapons on themselves in a conflict that left there a lifeless husk drifting through space. But some of them must have realized what was happening, Sarah protested. Surely someone tried to stop the madness before it was too late. There were always individuals who understood the danger, confirmed. Scientists like yourself who could see beyond immediate benefits to long term consequences. Leaders who prioritized wisdom over power. Citizens who valued life over victory. But they were always outnumbered by those who sought advantage over their rivals. The monitoring station they currently occupied was hidden in a nebula near the outer rim of consortium space, its sensors capable of intercepting communications across dozens of star systems. Through these listening posts, they had watched the spread of the technology had shared during his captivity. The results were exactly what the ancient being had predicted. Military research divisions throughout the consortium had begun crash programs to reverse engineer the alien weapon systems. 3 separate attempts to recreate the antimatter manipulation technology had resulted in catastrophic accidents, destroying entire research facilities, and killing thousands of scientists and support personnel. Rather than serving as warnings, these disasters had only intensified efforts to perfect the technology. They're learning from their mistakes, Sarah observed, reviewing the latest intelligence reports. Each failure brings them closer to success. Yes, agreed grimly. The Terran Colonial Authority has successfully created a stable antimatter containment system. The Defense Coalition has developed energy shields based on my people's force field technology. The Core Worlds Alliance has built their first artificial intelligence using neural mapping techniques derived from my captured memories. Each advancement represented a step closer to the catastrophic war that would inevitably consume human civilization. Sarah had hoped that the scattered nature of humanity's political structure might prevent the kind of unified disasters that had befallen other species. But instead, it seemed to be creating conditions for an even more destructive conflict. What about the independent systems? Sarah asked, The colonies that aren't part of the major power blocks, they are attempting to acquire the technology through espionage and black market purchases, replied. Fear drives them to seek weapons they cannot hope to control. Within 2 years, every human settlement with the resources to build a basic fabrication facility will have access to world ending technology. Sarah felt the familiar weight of despair settling over her shoulders. She had sacrificed everything to help escape, hoping that removing him from consortium control might slow the spread of dangerous knowledge. Instead, she had simply ensured that the technology would be developed without any restraining influence whatsoever. I've been thinking about what you said before, Sarah said, turning away from the depressing intelligence reports. About how every species produces individuals who might make different choices. Maybe we're approaching this wrong. How so? Asked, his six eyes focusing on her with interest. You've been waiting for entire civilizations to choose wisdom over power, but that's not how change actually works, Sarah explained, her excitement growing as the idea developed. Social transformation almost always begins with small groups of people who decide to act differently. Maybe we don't need to change all of humanity at once. Maybe we just need to save enough humans to ensure the species survives its own stupidity. Was silent for several minutes, considering her words with the patient deliberation she had come to associate with his decision making process. You are suggesting we become gardeners rather than observers, he said finally, cultivating seeds of wisdom that might grow into something larger. Exactly, Sarah said. Instead of watching human civilization destroy itself, we start building something new. Find people who share our values, bring them together, give them the knowledge they need to survive what's coming. And where would we plant this garden? Asked. The technology exists to track ships across interstellar distances. Any concentration of humans large enough to matter would eventually be discovered and absorbed by one of the major power blocks. Sarah smiled, feeling more hopeful than she had in months. That's where your people's technology gives us an advantage. You've shown me monitoring stations that have remained hidden for. You have ships that can travel between stars without using conventional hyperspace routes. You possess knowledge that could help a small population survive and thrive in places the consortium doesn't even know exist. The ancient being's posture shifted in ways Sarah had learned to recognize as deep contemplation. The proposal has merit, said slowly, but it would require careful selection of candidates. We would need individuals with essential skills, moral integrity, and the mental flexibility to abandon their former lives completely. I have ideas about that, Sarah said, pulling up files she had been secretly compiling for weeks. During my time at the research facility, I worked with scientists from across the galaxy. I know researchers who value knowledge over profit, engineers who prioritize safety over efficiency, doctors who actually care about preserving life. She displayed a list of names and profiles, dozens of individuals she had identified as potential candidates for their exodus. Doctor studies sustainable agriculture on frontier worlds, designs life support systems for deep space habitats. Captain Julia Harrison commands a merchant vessel and has spent years providing medical supplies to colonies the consortium has written off as economically unviable. These people have roots, connections, lives they value, pointed out. What would motivate them to abandon everything they know? The same thing that motivated me, Sarah replied. The understanding that everything they know is about to be destroyed. If we can show them what's coming, prove that the current path leads to extinction, I think many of them will choose survival over comfort. Studied the profiles Sarah had compiled, his multiple eyes scanning through biographical information, professional achievements, and personal histories. Doctor lost her to a terraforming accident caused by corporate negligence. Mister's family died in a habitat failure that could have been prevented with proper safety protocols. Captain Harrison has seen the consortium abandon colonies when they become unprofitable. They've all experienced the consequences of prioritizing short term gains over long term thinking, Sarah confirmed. They understand that the current system is fundamentally flawed. They just need to see an alternative. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent alert from the monitoring station's sensor array. Moved to the control console with fluid grace, his hands interfacing with the alien technology in ways that still seemed like magic to Sarah's human perspective. What is it? Sarah asked, seeing the tension in the creature's posture. Combat operations in the Rigel sector, replied, his voice grim. Two consortium battle fleets are engaging each other with weapons derived from my people's technology. The main display activated, showing a tactical overview of the battle unfolding 300 light years away. Sarah watched in horror as energy beams capable of destroying planets lanced between massive warships, while antimatter torpedoes erupted in miniature supernovas that consumed everything within thousands of kilometers. The Terran Colonial Authority and the Defense Coalition identified, reading the combatants' electronic signatures. Their territorial dispute over mining rights has escalated into open warfare. They are using weapons that could crack the planet they're fighting over. Sarah felt sick as she watched the destruction playing out on the screen. How many people are down there? Approximately 2 million colonists on Rigel 7, replied. The planet's orbital defenses are failing. Both fleets are taking massive casualties, but neither side seems willing to withdraw. The battle raged for another 6 hours before ending in mutual annihilation. Both fleets were destroyed, their wreckage scattered across the Rigel system like the fragments of a shattered civilization. The planet they had been fighting over was left uninhabitable, its surface by weapons fire, and its atmosphere contaminated by exotic radiation. 2 million people, Sarah whispered, watching the final sensor readings from the dead world. Gone because two groups of humans couldn't share mining rights. The first of many such conflicts, said sadly. This battle will be analyzed, studied, and improved upon. The next war will be fought with even more destructive weapons, and the casualties will be counted in billions rather than millions. Sarah stared at the tactical display long after the last sensor readings faded to black. The Battle of Rigel 7, as historians would undoubtedly name it, had lasted less than a day, but had demonstrated the horrifying potential of the technology humanity was so eager to weaponize. If this was just the beginning, what would the end look like? We need to start now, Sarah said, her voice filled with new urgency. Before more battles like this one, before the technology spreads any further. Agreed, replied. But we must be extremely careful. The intelligence services of every major power block will be investigating the source of these new weapons. They will be looking for any connection to my escape, any trace of the knowledge I shared. Sarah nodded, understanding the danger. Where do we begin? With Doctor, decided after consulting the profiles again. Her agricultural research station is isolated, easily defended, and already operating under conditions of strict security. If she agrees to join us, her facility could serve as our initial recruitment center. Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and terror as the reality of their mission settled over her. They were about to attempt something that had never been tried in the recorded history of galactic civilization: the deliberate preservation of a species' potential for growth and wisdom in the face of its apparent determination to destroy itself. There's something else we need to discuss, said, his tone becoming more formal. If we proceed with this plan, you will become the primary interface between my technology and your people. Humans will trust you in ways they could never trust me. I understand, Sarah said, though she wasn't entirely sure she did. I do not think you do, replied gently. You will become responsible for decisions that affect the survival of your entire species. You will choose who lives and who dies when the final catastrophe arrives. You will carry the weight of every person we cannot save, every world we cannot protect. The magnitude of the responsibility was staggering. Sarah had struggled with the relatively simple choice of helping one being escape captivity. Now she was being asked to take on the role of humanity's guardian, making life and death decisions for billions of people she would never meet. What if I make the wrong choices? Sarah asked. What if the people I select aren't the right ones? What if I save someone who turns out to be a monster, or fail to save someone who could have made all the difference? Then you will join the ranks of every leader who has ever faced impossible decisions with incomplete information, replied. Perfection is not required, Doctor. Wisdom is not required. Only the willingness to act according to your best understanding of what is right. Sarah looked around the monitoring station's control room, with its alien technology and incomprehensible displays. 6 months ago, she had been a mid-level researcher studying biological samples in a corporate laboratory. Now she was being asked to become the architect of humanity's post-apocalyptic future. Why me? She asked. You observed thousands of humans during your captivity. Surely some of them were better qualified for this kind of responsibility. Because you were the only one who chose compassion over ambition, said simply. When faced with power beyond imagination, your first thought was not how to use it, but whether it should be used at all. That quality is rarer than you realize, and it is exactly what this mission requires. Sarah thought about Dr. Reeves and Director, about their excitement over the weapons technology, and their complete disregard for the moral implications of their research. She thought about the Battle of Rigel 7 and the 2 million lives lost over mining rights. She thought about the future that awaited humanity if current trends continued. All right, she said finally, let's go save who we can. The journey to Doctor's research station took 4 days aboard the, traveling through hyperspace routes that existed outside the normal navigation networks. Ship moved through dimensions that human science barely acknowledged existed, emerging from faster-than-light travel without the energy signatures that conventional vessels produced. The Agricultural Research Station orbited a marginal world in the system, far from major shipping routes or strategic resources. Doctor had spent 7 years developing crop strains that could survive in hostile environments, providing food security for colonies that couldn't afford to import supplies from core worlds. She's alone except for a small support staff, Sarah observed, reviewing the station's personnel files. 3 technicians, 2 security guards, and an automated maintenance system, perfect for a quiet conversation. Assuming she agrees to listen, pointed out, your species has developed a healthy skepticism toward unsolicited visitors, especially ones who arrive unannounced in unregistered vessels. Sarah smiled despite the tension. Leave that to me, and I worked together on a terraforming project 5 years ago. She'll at least hear me out before calling security. They approached the research station using its advanced stealth systems, appearing on sensors as little more than background cosmic radiation. When they reached communication range, Sarah sent a carefully crafted message to Doctor's personal console, identifying herself and requesting a private meeting. The response came back within minutes. Sarah, I thought you were dead. The news report said you disappeared during some kind of terrorist attack on the xenobiology facility. Where the hell have you been? That's a long story, Sarah replied. Can you meet me in your private laboratory? I have something to show you that you're not going to believe. An hour later, Sarah materialized in Doctor's lab via the transporters, a technology that still seemed like pure magic despite patient explanations of its underlying principles. Stared in shock as her supposedly dead colleague appeared out of thin air. Teleportation, said weakly, sinking into her desk chair. You just teleported into my lab. It gets stranger, Sarah promised, activating her communicator. You can come through now. His eyes widened to the size of dinner plates as the 8-foot alien being materialized in her laboratory, its 6 eyes scanning the agricultural equipment with obvious interest. To her credit, the agricultural scientist managed to avoid screaming or fainting, though her hands gripped the edge of her desk hard enough to turn her knuckles white. Doctor, said in his resonant voice, I am pleased to meet you. Sarah has spoken of your work with great respect. Looked back and forth between Sarah and the alien creature, her scientific mind struggling to process what she was seeing. You're really here, she whispered. Both of you. This isn't some kind of elaborate hallucination. Unfortunately not, Sarah said, settling into a chair across from her friend. I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. The future of human civilization may depend on the choice you make in the next hour. Over the following 60 minutes, Sarah explained everything that had happened since capture, from the research facility's true purpose to the Battle of Rigel 7 to their plan for preserving human civilization's potential. Listened in stunned silence, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly just absorbing the impossible story. So you're telling me, said finally, that humanity is about to destroy itself with alien technology, and you want me to abandon my life's work to help build some kind of survival colony. That's essentially correct, Sarah confirmed. I know how it sounds, but I've seen what these weapons can do. The battle at Rigel 7 was just the beginning. Even if I believed you, said, what makes you think I'm the right person for this? I'm an agricultural scientist, not a leader or a visionary. I grow plants in hostile environments. Exactly, interjected. You understand how to sustain life under difficult conditions. When the wars begin in earnest, the survivors will need food, clean water, and habitable environments. Your knowledge could mean the difference between a colony that thrives and one that slowly starves. Was quiet for a long time, studying the alien being with the same intensity she usually reserved for her research subjects. You really believe this is going to happen? All out war using these superweapons. I have observed the pattern dozens of times across thousands of years, replied sadly. Your species is following the same trajectory as all the others. The only variables are timing and scale. But you're trying to change that trajectory, said, by saving some of us. By preserving the possibility of change, Sarah corrected. We can't save everyone, but we might be able to save enough people to ensure that humanity gets another chance to choose wisdom over power. Stood and walked to the laboratory's observation window, looking out at the stars beyond. My parents died in the colony disaster, she said quietly. Contaminated water supplies because the terraforming corporation cut corners on purification systems. 40,000 people died because someone wanted to save money on safety equipment. She turned back to face them, her expression resolute. If there's a chance to build something better, something that puts human welfare ahead of profit margins, then I want to be part of it. It won't be easy, Sarah warned. We'll be leaving behind everything familiar, everyone we care about. There's no guarantee we'll succeed. There's no guarantee we'll survive if I stay here either, replied. At least this way, I'll be working towards something meaningful instead of just hiding from the inevitable. Sarah felt a surge of hope as she watched her friend make the same impossible choice she had made months earlier. What about your staff? Can any of them be trusted with this information? My senior technician said without hesitation. He's been with me for 4 years, and I'd trust him with my life. The others are good people, but they have families in the core systems. They wouldn't abandon them for anything. Then we start with, Sarah decided. If he agrees to join us, we'll have the beginning of our team. The recruitment process continued for the next several hours as approached her senior technician with the extraordinary story. Proved to be as trustworthy as she had claimed, agreeing to join their mission with the same mixture of disbelief and determination that was becoming familiar. Where exactly are we going? Asked as they prepared to leave the research station. To a world my people prepared long ago as a refuge, explained. It is hidden beyond the boundaries of known space, equipped with everything necessary to support a small population indefinitely. And then we begin the real work, Sarah said, building a society that can survive what's coming and eventually grow into something better than what we're leaving behind. As the prepared to depart with its new passengers, Sarah found herself thinking about the journey ahead. They were no longer just trying to prevent a catastrophe, they were actively working to ensure that something would survive it. The responsibility was terrifying, but it was also oddly liberating. For the first time since her escape from the research facility, Sarah felt like they were moving toward something positive rather than simply running from something negative. They were going to fail to save most of humanity, but they might succeed in saving humanity itself. The ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying its small crew toward a destination that existed in no star charts, toward a future that no one could predict. Behind them, the galaxy continued its relentless march toward self-destruction. Ahead lay the possibility of redemption, carried forward by a handful of individuals who had chosen hope over despair. It was, Sarah reflected, a very human response to an impossible situation. When faced with the end of everything, humans didn't simply accept defeat. They found a way to plant seeds for a new beginning, even if they wouldn't live to see what grew from those seeds. Maybe that was what had impressed about her species. Not their intelligence or their technology or their potential for violence, but their stubborn refusal to give up even when logic suggested surrender was the only rational choice. Are you ready for what comes next? Asked, echoing the question he had posed months earlier during their escape. No, Sarah replied honestly, but I'm ready to try anyway. The ancient being's expression might have been a smile. Then perhaps there is hope for your people after all. The continued through hyperspace, carrying its precious cargo toward an uncertain but possible future, while behind them the galaxy burned with the light of wars that would consume civilizations and leave only memories in their wake. But somewhere in the darkness between stars, a new story was beginning to unfold, written by those who refused to accept that destruction was inevitable. It was a story that would take generations to complete, a story whose ending no one could predict. But it was their story, chosen freely by individuals who had decided that the possibility of hope was worth any sacrifice. And in a universe where hope was becoming an increasingly rare commodity, that choice mattered more than they could ever know.